Let's go live. And here we are. So let's do this. All right. And say hello to them because you are live.
Hello, ladies. Hello, everyone. I just want to, first of all, start by saying hello, everyone. And how are you feeling today? Just checking in with you to see how are you doing today.
There we go.
We're still getting ready for this call.
Got Heather, Sarah joined, Monica joined. Hello, ladies.
Hello, Heather. Hello, Sarah. Hello, Monica. Welcome, welcome. Hello, Juan. This is wonderful. I've got not one guest, but two today to answer all your questions. Whether you're a tenant, because maybe, and I don't know, some of the ladies on this form are tenants still, or whether you're a landlord. So to know both sides and what you do in these testing times and how to go about this. I've also got, as I promised yesterday, that I have sample letters that you ladies can take and make it your own and pick one of the 5 letters. I've got 5 letters I will be sharing with you at the end of this call so that you can use to send to your tenants, or we're going to hear whether this is a good idea or not, because some people, they say send them a letter, some say call them, some say don't do anything until you see what's happening. So we will hear from our 2 top professionals today about what is the best thing to do, but you will have these letters in case you need them. Hello, Tammy. Hello, Tiffany. Hello, Samira. This is awesome to have you all here, ladies. Yeah, I mean, let's start. I have a lot to say about mindset and how do we, it's really, our minds are right now the best thing that we can protect of what we really need to feed it. That's what it's all about. It's feeding our mind with really amazing things and not just only watch and binging on Netflix or shows and all of that. Yes, it's okay to maybe watch 1 hour or maybe 2, but not do what everyone else is doing, because at this time we are going into an amazing opportunity, especially for real estate investors, and you need to be educated and learn as much as you could. And that's why I'm doing all these Facebook Lives with you ladies. So without further ado, let's have, maybe what we're gonna do right now is have our 2 guests. Give me 1 second, ladies. Bring them in. Just 1 second. Let me see how I'm navigating this as well. So let me just see. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, Tahani. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much to both of you for just showing up as leaders on such a short notice. Like when I just called you, both of you, you're like, I'm in, you know, when and what and how can we help? And as well, Kayla, for you, like, I got a babysitter. I didn't hear from her for a few seconds, and then she's like, I got a babysitter. Let's go, let's do this. So thank you both for showing up for these ladies and everyone that's listening to this Facebook Live to answer their questions. And together, we're all in this together. So let's start with maybe you, Andrew. Can you please, in few words, introduce yourself and let the ladies know who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I'm wearing a couple of hats. So I'm both a property management company as a third-party provider, an owner over the past 15 or so years, as well as the president of the local Waterloo Regional Apartment Management Association, which of course is an association with members who we share the common interest of best practice in rental housing provision.
That's awesome. And the second hat?
Well, and then of course, as a property management company, principal at Management First, and that's a third-party management company coming off of, as I said, about 15 to well, more like 17 or 18 years now of kind of owning and operating rental housing.
That's awesome. And actually, Kayla introduced you to us. I don't know if you remember, Kayla. That's when I reached out to you.
It's the connection.
The connection is not happening here. Andrew is talking and I'm not hearing what you're saying. Andrew,
Yes.
is it just lagging, Ramsey, or is
Could
it
just
like
be a
no?
lag, yeah.
Just be lag. I guess he is hearing us.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think-
awesome. Okay, so Andrew, yeah, it was actually Kayla that introduced you to us. I don't know if you recall, but thank you, Kayla, for introducing Andrew to us.
My pleasure.
Yes, and your turn right now, Kayla, who you are and what you do.
So I have been an investor for 17 years, and for the last 10 years, I've been an advocate for landlords. And we've formed ourselves onto a Facebook group on Facebook, and we meet once a year for our general meeting. We advocate for change with the Residential and Tenancy Act, the Landlord and Tenant Board that benefits good landlords, good tenants, and the taxpayers to create a better housing system for all parties that are involved right now. And our major support is about giving that support to landlords through their day-to-day operations through our groups, and bringing landlords and property managers and paralegals together, just like I brought you, Andrew.
Yes, yes, and thank you. And thank you for that. Michaela, I mean, she is one woman that's really taken the reign to protect landlords and to speak on our behalf and to take it to the government and tell whoever needs to hear the message of what we want them to hear. So this is awesome. Thank you both again. So let's start with what are you seeing right now, Andrew, with all these craziness about tenants not want to pay rent, and how are you dealing with it? And yeah.
So I was speaking with a reporter yesterday, and I was talking about the importance of words and language, and said that we're hearing the word unprecedented a lot over the last week or so about how the COVID-19 virus has had an impact on Canada, I mean, around the world, and then of course locally. And I was just saying that unprecedented really isn't strong enough a word, right? I don't think we have a word that encompasses the feelings and reactions that all Canadians are experiencing right now. You know, it's the uncertainty of what comes next. It's the pain of knowing that the only way to fight against this COVID-19, of course, is to isolate. And that's resulted in layoffs. Businesses are closing their doors. And it's a very messy and unpredictable time. So, you know, Tahani, when you asked me to be a part of the conversation, I mean, where I'm looking for direction and leadership is really to our governments. So both Premier Doug Ford here in Ontario and the daily updates from Prime Minister Trudeau. Even today at about 11:15, I tuned into the Prime Minister's address. And among the things he talked about was of course, not the bill, but it's the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit has been passed and accepted, and with the goal of that of putting money into the pockets of individual Canadians. So that, along with you know, my hope of hearing from Premier Doug Ford here in Ontario, is that there will be provincial money made available to individuals as well. So all that said, and the unpredictability of money flowing has a huge impact on rental housing providers. So if you are a person who has invested in a property, not only are you dealing with the own fears and unpredictable nature of your own well-being, but then of course you're looking at your investment thinking, well, what happens if the person who's renting that home or the family who rents that home is experiencing the same challenges and difficulties that I am, and they aren't able to make their payments. And of course, that's driving people to make decisions and you know, trying to reach out and get confirmation and some sense of stability that those rental payments are coming. So I think I can share that same fear and anxiousness that is going around. And I think the perspective I'm taking is we're all going to wake up from this eventually, and we're going to have to interact with each other and you know, and kind of continue on with our lives. So approaching this rent cycle and how we manage our properties and investments, I think is really, really important. And this is where people really need to take that step up into a leadership role and understand the larger impact of what they're doing. So to kind of answer your question, I don't think there's a single right answer. I can think of wrong answers, but what we want to do in kind of the approach I'm taking is trying to maintain a sense of dignity and respect with people that I'm dealing with on a kind of month-to-month basis. And I think we are going to see, you know, like by extending kind of a hand to tenants, and saying, listen, we're experiencing this. I acknowledge that there's so much change and uncertainty right now. Of course, it's helpful to kind of maintain the agreement that we have. If you're struggling to come up with payments, please let me know as a heads up. And what that allows a property manager to do, of course, is to get their ducks in a row and plan for what could be late payments. You know, and quite honestly, probably in most cases, out of character late payments. I mean, I think that most people want to pay their bills. They take pride in knowing that they're, you know, taking care of their obligations and promises. And I don't think this is any different, except to say, well, there's a lot of uncertainty. So if I can bring it right back to the Prime Minister's announcement earlier today and the distribution of money through the country, you know, I think my hope is that once those checks start flowing, which isn't said to start probably until April 6th at the earliest, you know, people will be able to, if they're having trouble, at least try and take care of those obligations and rental payments.
So are those for tenants? Are you talking about money for tenants only, Andrew, here? Is that what they announced?
Yeah, so this is money for individuals. So this is they've termed it the CERB, the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit, and what it's looking like is about $2,000 a month. I think it's about $900 biweekly. As CBC is reporting, the intent of this package is to try and make the flow of money easier than harder. So it's acknowledging that yes, either you've suffered job loss, yes, you're caring for someone with COVID, you've been infected with COVID yourself, or basically your income has somehow ceased because of the experiences that you've been having. But of course, everybody wants it immediately. But I think even Prime Minister Trudeau was saying, you know, it's not going to happen today, but the goal is early April, right? And once people kind of go online and make their claim, that money should flow rather quickly. So go ahead, Tahani.
Is that a link that maybe you can share with us so that we can maybe pass on to everyone on this call and to the ladies?
Yeah,
and
so well, I was going to say, yeah, so federal government is organizing that now. You know, they're proposing access in early April, so they've got to get it. So I don't have a link right now. I don't think anybody does, but I would say stay tuned, particularly to the news outlets. I know CBC has been on top of this, so paying attention to the headlines is really important. And I would say that for anybody, whether or not you're a renter or a homeowner, pay attention because we're all impacted by this. Yeah. I might also say, you know, as far as a strategy, so what to do if you're a provider and you own a house and you're worried about money coming in. I kind of took a look at, you know, what I'm trying to do. And I would say contacting tenants and extending a hand and listening is really important. I would say contacting your lender. I know the big banks are talking about mortgage payment deferrals. What that looks like in practice may vary from bank to bank, but that would be an important program to take advantage of if, in fact, you meet their expectations for that. And then I'd say if you're a property management company, so contacting owners. Right now, if owners are kind of left out of the loop, they're as frightened as anybody. They've made a huge investment into you know, something that they hope will benefit their family in the future, and they also want to contribute to, you know, Canadian housing. And there are a lot of questions. So I would suggest that if you find yourself in any one of those categories, reaching out and communicating is really important.
Kayla, hang in there, my dear. We will be there with you shortly.
It's good. I'm getting a break.
Yeah, good. We'll be there with you shortly. One question though, Andrew, is that I'm seeing tenants actually putting a poster in apartment buildings and, you know, in places saying, you know, don't pay rent, and almost like using or taking advantage of what's happening right now so that they don't pay their rent. So what is your advice on that? And what kind of forms can we give these tenants that don't pay rent on time? Is there such a form that you are giving? And yeah, and then also, I guess, so the form, what do we do? And then the letters, I have 5 sample letters to give the ladies after this call so that they can give to their tenants. So there is people that say, give those letters. Some people, they say, let your property management do it, or some people, they say don't even do it at all? So those are the two questions I would love to for you to discuss.
Sure. So typically with in Ontario, so we know that, and Kayla will probably speak more to this, but we know that the Residential Tenancy Act governs what rental housing providers can do by law. And so when we're talking about what forms can be given out, typically if someone goes into rental arrears and a rental payment isn't made on the first of the month, then an N4, non-payment of rental form, needs to be completed and issued.
Same as usual, same business as usual.
Well, that's what typically would happen. I think in this case, I think we really do have to weigh the impact of what that's going to do. So right now, the court system and landlord tenant tribunal, who hears applications and make decisions on applications based on those forms, are closed down. So to issue an N4 on April 2nd or April 3rd might not have the same desired outcome that it might typically have, which at the best of times over the last couple of years has been a very slow and exhausting process with the Landlord Tenant Board. So now with it essentially closed down, issuing an N4 and then hoping to go to an application may not result in anything. And so, you know, and not to start, you know, quoting out, but it was interesting this morning when Prime Minister Trudeau was speaking. He was speaking about if you are, and named off a number of different professions and roles that people have, and he included landlords in that. And he expressed, you know, his hope that landlords would be part of the solution with this. So the absence of a rental payment, you know, an N4, I think down the road, much like a mortgage deferral program that a bank might offer, it still obligates whoever's promised to pay that money. It still needs to be paid. I think it's with great sensitivity and understanding the impact of submitting forms that can't necessarily be processed in due time, you know, and perhaps considering what it might look like to allow a little bit of breathing room for people to get all their things in order. And an example is receiving money from the federal government through this emergency response benefit, again, which is supposed to take, you know, start issuing out money mid-April. So I think that's really an important consideration. And that's not to take away from the feelings that people have. I've seen the same posts from different tenant activist groups around the province about, you know, join the wave type of thing. I try to put my, you know, I believe in people, and I believe that most Canadians and most people in Ontario want to take care of their responsibilities. And so my hope is that those voices, although loud, are not representative of the majority of people who rent homes here in Ontario.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you. So the N4, still keep it going, and then send these letters, or maybe even pick up the phone and talk to your tenant. It depends on how many you have. If you have only few, maybe that's a good thing to do. But if you have too many, just document it and send it by email, or maybe, yeah, I don't know about mailing it. What do you think, Andrew? Mailing a copy is also a good maybe practice, or?
Well, I think it's process, and this is really causing property management companies to reflect on their own practices. So a form, an N4 non-payment of rent form that's typically issued on the 2nd or 3rd of the month, maybe the consideration is given to what's happening with COVID-19 and its impact, and saying, okay, well, listen, we're not going to, you know, we need to allow people some time to receive money and take care of their obligations. Maybe N4s aren't issued until the end of the month. I think, in my opinion, Tahani, an N4 can represent monies owing or arrears that take place over several months. And so although we don't want to, you know, I don't think anybody wants to build up arrears that they can't take care of. I think with sensitivity, it might be a better outcome for everyone if we just take that into consideration. And once the Landlord Tenant Board in Ontario gets up and running again and starts processing applications, then maybe it's time to rely on those. That's not to take away. I think it's an important point you make, though. I think even the best, you know, the lawyers who are really working in this industry would say documentation is incredibly important. Dates, amounts of money, and basically filing is you know, and keeping those files are really, really important in the chance that you do have to pursue that form with the LTB.
That's awesome. Tomorrow we are having a lawyer that specializes in this joining us and answering also questions about legality and forms and all of this. One last question before I move on to Kayla, Andrew, is this only Ontario-based advice, or would you say that this is also provincial advice, like people from, we've got Vancouver, we've got, you know, out west and out east? What are your thoughts with regards to what you just said?
Yes, so I'm looking to leadership in the industry, right? So in Ontario, we've got, well, across Canada, there's the Canadian Federation of Apartment Associations, which is really trying to, I mean, based out of Ottawa, and making those relationships and connections with, you know, with people who influence policy decision, et cetera, et cetera. In Ontario, I mean, there's the Federation of Rental Housing Providers of Ontario. And then I think it's really important, people out in BC and out east particularly, I know in British Columbia, there's Landlord BC, which would be a organization to look to. Out east, it's, oh, gee whiz, it's blanked on me. IPOAN, I think are the initials. And I can send off those links to you as well. I think the most fear is experienced when people aren't connecting and communicating with others. And I think no matter where you are, by reaching out to an association, and even through a you know, kind of a platform like this, Tahani, people know that they're not alone, that the issues they're facing are the issues that we're all facing across the country. And we need to kind of lean on each other to get through this together. And I would suggest doing that might change decisions that people make with hopes of having the best outcome for everybody.
Yes, thank you, thank you. And that goes also for some of the ladies that are in the US, because we have a great following also from the US here in this in this community. So same goes for you. So reach out to the property managers in your area, and then again, just, you know, ask for maybe updates and all of that. And people are very helpful. You get a lot of help. Moving on to Kayla, who is doing a lot of work. Thank you, Andrew. And stay tuned, because there might be some questions that the ladies are gonna start posting. But for now, I wanna move on to Kayla a little bit. Kayla, you are working so hard for the last, I would say, few years on behalf of landlords. So what are you seeing right now that's happening? And your work right now is even more important than ever before. So what are your thoughts about what's going on?
Well, Tahani, we want to give everyone hope, and we want everyone to know that we are in it together, but we have to face reality that the Landlord and Tenant Board it was in crisis before this pandemic, and it's going to be in chaos now, and it's going to be in chaos after this pandemic. So we call on our governments in a way for them to create a solution through the pandemic that can help the housing providers provide housing to their tenants now and after the pandemic. So what they do now with the funds that is coming, the relief that's going to be coming from the government, now it's about making sure it gets where it needs to be. We have to consider that everyone's in survival mode, everyone's in panic, and when they start getting $2,000, and plus if there's money coming from the province, a lot of them may want to do that protest with keep your rent. For the there's so much of being unknown. And that makes me very nervous, because when we have Justin Trudeau, we have Doug Ford, and we have John Tory, and they would all mostly say, no one should worry about their rent. The evictions are now on hold. Food trumps rent. Landlords need to be able to work with their tenants. And we have to take into consideration that landlords, not all of them are in a predicament to take care of all their tenants. They have contingency plans in order to take that one or that two tenant that can't pay, and you work that into your business. But when you can see a big influx of your tenants not paying, not because they can't, because they got laid off, it's because they don't want to, based on this movement. Our advocacy started 10 years ago because we have people who are abusing the system as it is. They're abusing the Landlord and Tenant Board, and they're abusing the way that the laws are tilted towards protecting them. Right now, before this pandemic, there was 58,423 applications being brought to the Landlord and Tenant Board for non-payment of rent. And if you get to hear some of these cases, it's not so much of as a hardship situation, because we have rent banks that are in every community that people can tap into to get that relief if they fall underneath hardship situations. There was a cry for affordable housing and the housing crisis, and we kept asking ourselves, is this a housing crisis, an affordable housing crisis, or is this a supply and demand issue? And for anyone that you can talk to, even from our elected officials, they will say this is a supply and demand issue. And we have to encourage more investors into this industry, and we have to hold the current ones that we have. But the way that the system was before in the crisis mode, we had landlords leaving the industry and we had investors not wanting to come in. Now with this pandemic, we have to prepare ourselves what's to come. Have we put a bad taste in our investors' mouths right now because of the fact that our elected officials are telling us there are units? They're making us work for them. They're making us say that you're not able to kick out your people. And we don't want to kick out. It's a virus. You need to keep people in their homes. But you need to, as a government, need to provide compensation to protect the current supply and to protect it for the future.
That is golden words as well. So it's really like, on one hand, it's a business, really. We're small business owners trying to run our real estate business. And yet, instead of seeing us as business owners, they're saying that we've got the money and we are going to suffer just because we are providing this housing to these tenants who, most of them can actually pay the rent, but maybe right now, all of them are choosing not to pay rent. It's gonna be interesting to see how many will end up paying rent. And Andrew, we want your opinion on that, like, come April, first week of April. But it would be very interesting to see those that will stick to, to their integrity and pay because they know they can afford it, versus those that are just gonna say, you know what, I'm not gonna pay it. It's free money, it's free ride.
But Tahani, this is where we get our elected officials to give it for, if they're coming out and they said that this benefit is for rent and for groceries, but then they know of this movement of people not wanting to pay. This is about working a policy in together with the government. So because landlords know their tenants, they know which ones have gotten laid off, which ones are not going to pay just because they're vindictive and they don't want to pay. And you got the ones that are just, just need a little bit of help. So issuing those N4 notices and getting them out to our tenant, it justifies that the landlord and tenant are both on the same page, that this is the amount of money that needs to be issued. And this is the money that should be, this paperwork now as our N4, we can't do anything with it at the landlord and tenant board, but we can certainly go ahead and give that to the elected officials to be like, hey, pony up, because it shouldn't be the responsibility of a private investor to be able to take on this burden. We understand that it's a business, and we understand that a lot of businesses are taking a hit right now. But if you look at the overall, what this pandemic has taught us is that there is 4 top things that we need to be concerned about for the future. Is that you have your healthcare to be a priority, you need your utilities being a priority, you need food, and you need shelter. And if our elected officials are not telling our grocery stores to start handing out free groceries or give us the groceries at cost, or we have the hydro rates, thank you for the discount. Ford government expects us to lower our rents now to cover the discount that we have for the hydro rates. And we understand that this is a pandemic and we need to help each other, but it comes down to, it's to eat or to be eating. We have to see if, do we have homeowners who lost their jobs? They're depending on this type of money to keep them afloat, to keep putting food onto their table. But we have to now look in the future to make sure that we are putting more effort into our healthcare, the food, the utilities, and shelter, because the roads and the activities and the artsies and everything that you want to go and spend our tax-paying money on, that's great through good times. But when bad times come, this is what people want. If you look at any press release and anything on Facebook Live, and you see our elected officials talking, people are like, rent. What about my rent? What about my rent? Like, that is the number one thing people need to know. They need to keep a roof over their head. So I would like to see my tax-paying dollars that is being used for current rent banks that are currently out there that helped people, but they're now closed doors. You can't go in on a first come, first served basis and have your tenants there seeking some relief. And we have the operating cost that taxpayers use for the landlord and tenant board. We want to start allocating that money into a rent bank in order to have our tenants, or technically the landlords, to make sure it's not being an abuse system for our landlords to tap into to keep the funds flowing. Because if you don't have it flowing now, it's really going to hinder our investment for the future. And there's not a lot of people that want to get into this. So you really need to make sure that we protect the current supply and we protect protect the small landlords now.
That's awesome. That's great advice. And is there anything that you are doing right now that maybe we can have the ladies involved in, like signing petitions or anything else?
Number one is about getting into the Ontario Landlords Watch members Facebook group, making sure that you state that you found us through Tahani's podcast. So that way we can let you in. Through there, we're going to give directions about still making that phone call to your MPP. This is very crucial at this time. They're home. There seems to be a little bit more time to speak with them, and keep a diary on who's corresponding with you and give them these type of solutions. They're going to hear a lot of issues. This is about getting the elected officials the solutions that could indeed not cause this crisis which is now chaos to continue to be chaos, and making sure that we're bounded and united as investors, because landlords have been disconnected and not a strong voice. And our landlords, our elected officials need to represent landlords to be that necessity and to respect what we do and how we put risk on there. We're not expecting, like, we're all taking hits here, but when it comes down to our housing, that's something that we shouldn't be gambling with, and we need to make sure that we support it, no matter if it's the landlords, the tenants, the taxpayers. Like, we have to kind of come together to make sure that we can come out of this stronger.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for the advice. And ladies, it is the Ontario Landlord Watch. And then there is a lot of, also, if you have any questions, you can post them here while we have both of these amazing humans on the call can answer them for you. I know Brooke is saying we are not allowed to get more as soon as hydro goes up. We are not allowed to get more as soon as hydro goes up. I don't know what that means.
That would pretty much mean, with the hydro rates now being a one steady rate instead of the timing rates, and then the Ford government wanting us to decrease our rents in order to pass on those savings for that time period. Again, that's probably going to be where they're going to be like, this is where the unjust is. This is where they're not analyzing what the RTA says, LTB says. But when you start decreasing the rent, trying to bring that back up, because now the rates went back up again. We would love, as landlords, when our rental units are all inclusive and our hydro rates and our utilities are constantly rising, we get to fluctuate our rent to cover that. But the law does not allow us to do that. So that's why when we say give us a discount, in reality, people are staying home. There's more usage that's happening. So how we can pass on a discount that's not even there.
Okay. Awesome. Monica is saying, great session. Any comments on using last month's rent, getting mixed answers? Is it legit or not?
It's not legit. I'm sorry. I'm going all off on leaving Andrew there, but they say
Andrew can answer as well after, for sure. Yes.
So they got the last month's rent, and it's made for last month's rent. Landlords rather take it for a damage deposit. We want to take it for utilities, but you put the rules there. We have to follow them. And it's not to the point that if you use your last month's rent through this limbo period, the fact remains that now landlords don't even have last month's rent to count on for when these tenants want to relocate. And when tenants want to relocate and they need to pay first and last, that last month's rent being in place helps them create that first and last for their next new place. So you're ruining a system that's already been in place for it. And for the government just to keep saying, you know, the money's there in the bank. Well, you know what? Money's there in the bank for the maintenance and the emergencies. But the way that the chaos is happening now, because of the fact that they come out with these broad statements about not worrying to pay your rent, food trumps rent, and then we have our counterpartners of our tenants trying to do a rent strike. It's caused so much chaos that we don't see how this is going to work into the landlord and tenant board. We always inform everyone, still give out the N4 because they might need that later on down the road when seeking relief for rent. And at least you're showing that you're still following protocol. You may not be able to, you're not going to be able to file that application at the landlord and tenant board, and you're not going to be able to get an enforcement right now, but at least it shows that you're keeping the interaction and you're showing that both of you are agreeing on that amount. But in reality, we have to state that when we open back up and you have these N4 notices and you had a tenant that just refused to seek help or relief and they refused to pay you, is our adjudicators going to have us be presented in person, wait months and months to get there in person, to be only told that based on the pandemic, we're going to work at a payment arrangement, and this is the payment arrangement that could stretch out to X amount of months. And if the tenant fails that, then you can come back, get your eviction, and be in the waiting pool for your sheriff. So there could be a longer eviction process. And these tenants who know how broken the system was before the pandemic, they're going to know what it's going to be like after, unless the government steps up and changes the RTA and the LTB.
So the best advice I'm hearing from you is really to continue doing what you would do normally with the NForce and just document everything. Even a way of emailing these tenants, document when you email them and how often you email them, so that when the time, if they still persist not to pay, at least you have a case. That's what you're kind of like saying, right? For both of you, I guess.
It's yes, and make sure you handle that N4 notice in a very delicate way, because if not, you're going to be on the front page of your newspaper that you're given an eviction notice through a pandemic. This is about, I'm giving this because this is what technically the law tells me to do. I know we're going through on hard times. I know I'm willing to work with you to an extent of how this money is going to pool in to help you. This paper might be something that is needed for you to get relief later on down the road. And still, I'm not a paralegal, but I'm pretty sure that you have 30 days from applying to the Landlord and Tenant Board. So you wait your 14 days, then you can apply to the Landlord and Tenant Board. And you still have 30 days from that 14-day notice in order to be able to apply to the Landlord and Tenant Board. And again, we don't know when they're opening. From the sounds of it, July, August, we don't know. And this is the fear that people have, and this is why we have fear coming from our investors who are barely cash flowing, and they want to start taking matters into their own hands. So that's why it's very, very important that our elected officials come out with a solid plan that helps these housing providers to keep their tenants safe. This is a help landlords, help tenants situation. And this is what we've been always advocating for, that the government needs to help the landlords, help the tenants. If you keep putting restrictions and if you keep putting responsibilities and fees, it's always going to get passed down to the tenant. So it's almost like the food chain. So they got to see us as being a portion of that, being very powerful to help them deal with the housing crisis that was there and deal with the housing crisis that will be after.
Awesome advice. Thank you, Kayla. How about you, Andrew? What are your thoughts around that?
On issuing N4s?
Yes.
So the N4 is a mechanism in Ontario, and other provinces have similar processes, right? So if someone does go into arrears and defaults on a rental payment on the first of the month, the only way really to have it processed is to issue this non-payment of rent form. And the non-payment of rent form, essentially, as Kayla was mentioning, starts a clock ticking for 14 days. And really, I think it's the anxiousness and nervousness of an owner right now is not knowing what's going to happen 5 days from now on the first of the month, and then how to react to that. So right now, no one knows what's going to happen on the 1st of April, and only can people react after that day comes and goes. And as I said, I mean, my hope and my belief in people is that most people want to take care of their obligations and are going to do the best they can. As far as timing goes, we find ourselves, and again, like it's an unprecedented situation that we're all experiencing. And so with money flowing from the federal government to help, again, I mean, you have to acknowledge that the money is to help. It is not to replace people's income. But by providing that kind of stabilization, an N4 and issuing a non-payment of rent form may be a moot point. And I think what the perspective I'm taking is that, yes, it's important to document. And I think, and even following the lead of a law firm out of London, Ontario called Cohen Hiley, who operates offices around the, I don't get any payment for this, but who operates offices out of here in Kitchener as well, will say it's very important to follow processes. I think to Kayla's point, though, it's also almost equally as important to be sensitive to how these processes are being followed. And I think if we take a step back and look, and if the LTB isn't processing anything for weeks or months to come, then really what it is it's just making sure you've got everything detailed.
Yes.
You know, and that includes payments made out. I mean, we have to lean on municipalities as well.
Yes.
As we start going through the property tax cycle and the utility payments and all these other obligations that every home across Ontario has, condo, detached home, or multi-family dwelling.
Yes.
Yeah, so there's a lot of considerations, I guess, going into this.
Okay, so we have a lot of questions here, and I have also a couple for the ladies, which is payment arrangements. I would love to talk a little bit about payment arrangements and what are your thoughts around that? If they say, I don't have 1,500, but I can give you 500, what are your thoughts around that? And then there's a few other questions here, the ladies that are asking. She has set up a payment schedule for tenants to catch up on what they can't pay during the time. Would a schedule make sense if you have like a payment schedule?
From my aspect of that is about the going trend that we're trying to do, because we are humans, is about pay me what you can now for the first, and let's see what we can do now for the 15th. You know, based on the Justin Trudeau stating that when you are applying for this relief, from your date of applying, you will have money in 10 days. So it all going to be really depending now exactly when this is available for people to apply and when that money comes in from them applying, which is technically direct deposit after 10 days. So once we know for sure when it's active, that's when landlords can now still have some type of rules and guidance in place, because right now there's no rules. And this is why things can get out of hand very quickly, because there's no rules. But if we have the government's guidance on when this money's coming in, but making sure that we're working with them. And if you can have a payment plan, anything is good right now, because your landlords, you have bills that still need to be paid. The utilities still need to be paid. They might defer your water payments or your hydro, but again, when the time comes and that 3 or that 4 months time is up, they expect money and they expect it now. So same thing with landlords. That's why really, I guess, so upset with the way the government has handled this so far, is because they've almost caused this by telling people that evictions are on hold. That was like almost the first thing, besides, hey, the state of emergency, by the way, you're not getting evicted. Sure, well, if I'm in panic mode and I'm in survival mode and I need groceries and I need medication, I get the fact that I would probably want to keep my rent too. So that's why the government is needing to be there for the people. And if the people are saying, what about my rent? They need to give the money for the rent, but not give it to them. It has to come to the provider to make sure that it's
To the landlords, yes, so that they don't spend it on whatever. Yes, thank you for that. That's awesome. Do you feel the same way, Andrew, about the payment schedule?
Well, I think that's what it'll come down to. So whether or not a owner does that payment schedule on their own, or does wait to have something heard by the landlord tenant board, ultimately it will likely go to that a payment schedule of some sort, either through mediation or via decision at the LTB. And so I think, you know, being proactive and again reaching out to people. If you you know, a small landlord, reaching out to individuals, you know, is possible. And probably the best thing to do. I think, again, if it's fear and anxiety driving conversations, I think it's best to probably write down what you want to say and the points you want to get across to people, so that when that opportunity comes up, it comes across as being very sincere and genuine. To Kayla's point, I think, you know, we've got our federal and provincial governments making decisions right now. I think it's as equally as important to lean on our municipal leaders, who will have to make decisions about these utilities such as water, property tax, and if they're not paid, municipal leaders and decision makers right now can simply add those things to property tax bills. And I think that we're going to have this conversation sooner or later as to what is the best way forward to seek those types of arrears. But I think we're still months ahead of those conversations, and having municipal leaders really understand the impact of this whole COVID-19 scenario that's happening presently.
Amazing, thank you. Another question from Monica. She says, if the tenant claims they've lost their job, and if we ask for proof, are they obliged to provide it?
I would ask why, what proof, like what purpose would it serve to ask those types of questions? I mean, you know, if you're endeavoring on leveraging the legal system, perhaps it's best to seek legal advice through a paralegal or lawyer as to what steps and information you can and should be asking for. At the end of the day, right now, people who have experienced job loss, are able to access this money being provided by federal and provincial governments. And this includes businesses through the temporary business wage subsidy, right? So if you are employing someone, there's little bits of money out there to help people get by. But I would ask, what real purpose are you hoping to achieve?
To see if they're lying or not, Andrew, because maybe some of them might be lying, saying they've lost their job, but they haven't. Maybe that's what she's talking about.
Absolutely, and I would say that it might be best to seek legal advice for that then, and maybe speak with a paralegal and someone who knows the real intricacies of kind of personal information disclosure and also the obligations of a lease. Because you're right, if someone has misrepresented their income on a lease, then that can be a conflict and an issue. But that would be my best suggestion, is to seek legal advice and make a decision.
Thank you, Andrew. Monica, keep that question for tomorrow for the lawyer. Maybe we'll definitely ask it. Anything, Kayla, on that, or should I ask?
I would say that one is your tenant. You're going to know their tenants, and you're going to know what the government has closed down, what's the deemed essential services. So you kind of going to be able to work in the fact that you have trust with them, but know that the relief is for them too. No matter if it's from them being working, if they're unemployed, this is the relief that they're trying to get out to all Canadians. So it's just about giving them hope that there is relief coming, and just knowing that there is that 10-day span for them to get it. So I don't really think to say that, you need to show proof at this time. I wouldn't even bother. It's their responsibility to make sure that they look after their well-being, just like landlords are looking after their own. But you can still be there for your tenants and make sure that you're showing your compassion and show that you're understanding to the situation and showing that you are willing to work with them as much as you possibly can based on your financial well-being.
Awesome from both of you. Awesome answers. How about if there is a guarantor? Christelle saying, how about if there is a guarantor, can you ask them to pay for the rent, or how would you handle that?
Again, I would still wait to see what type of relief is coming from the government now before you start working in the guarantors. Again, it's going to be a stressful time for the guarantor as well. So we really want to just sit back and wait to see what is being rolled out first. And just know that, whatever plan, it kind of works with the guarantor. At least that tenant may not say, hey, I ain't paying you. And it can give that landlord a little bit ooey gooey feeling that you could potentially go after the guarantor after the fact. But right now it's still to be patient, to be kind, and to wait until to see what type of relief our elected officials are planning to give.
Awesome. Anything, Andrew? Did I hear you? You want to say something, or should I?
Well, I can speak to kind of what's happening in practice. So, imagine someone falling into rental arrears back at the beginning of February, and for that conversation to start now with a guarantor. And I can tell you, broaching that with great sensitivity was very, very important. And I would agree with Kayla that right now, everyone across the country is under a huge amount of stress, and it's the unknowns right now. And I think kind of taking that into consideration prior to those conversations can help things go a long, long way with a better outcome for everybody.
So some of the landlords are getting a little bit anxious and a little bit scared that some of the tenants or most of the tenants are ganging up and not paying. And then one of the landlords that I know of had put a post saying, are we legally okay to really put names of tenants in a, like, say on a, like, not a petition, but somewhere on a Facebook or somewhere saying that, a so-and-so did not pay. Is that legal, or is that really not abiding by law in terms of Privacy Act and all of that? What are your thoughts on that?
I think, Tahani, you might get a really good answer from the lawyer you're going to have on tomorrow.
Yeah.
The legalities around that. Perhaps it's worth considering, though, some of the social media posts that have come about, kind of rent strikes and so on, have come out of Parkdale, which is an area in Toronto. And yet you have to consider you're talking about buildings with hundreds of people renting apartments there that are involved in this. So certainly this has caught the eye of local decision makers in Toronto. And should that come to fruition, then you're talking about huge properties that are going without rental payments and real huge impacts as well. And so I would say that our leaders do see the same things we see. And to Kayla's point, I mean, it's going to take some time to react to everything, but we're really not going to know until after April 1st and the subsequent 1sts of May and June.
That's awesome.
So honey, this is the trickle effect that's going to happen if our elected officials don't act now, that landlords are going to take things into their own hands. And this is where, is it legal? Is it not? Technically, from our knowledge, that you can't have a bad list of tenants. You also can't collect your N4 notices that you're giving out. But with Bill 184 that was introduced through its first reading, that was coming out before the pandemic. And on there, it would state that N12s and N13 notices for taking it over for your personal use or evicting someone based on renovations, they wanted to keep a database of landlords at the Landlord and Tenant Board to give adjudicators some idea if there is investors abusing those type of forms. And our backing of, advocating for the fact that if you want to keep a list of bad landlords abusing a form, why aren't we having a database of tenants abusing their form?
Exactly. If they're looking at one side of the coin, why not look at the second side of the coin? And I always say, thank God for the work that you do, Kayla. Like, you've got my
Andrew too. There's so much of a team of us now, and like talking with Andrew and talking with the other landlord associations, this is about uniting the front and the same message. And some people would be, we're just small to mid-scale landlords, and that's who I fight for. It's great to have the bigger landlords and developers with us, but in reality, we're looking at small landlords being that solution to the affordable housing crisis, but they have to work with us. Right now, they gave us a tool bag, but there's no tools inside of it.
That's awesome. Let's see if there is one more question from Paula. If you are a small property landlord and one tenant has advised they've been concerned, one tenant has been advised they've been laid off and can only pay April, but they are concerned they won't be able to make May rent. If you can manage to cover mortgage, I guess, payments, would you cover the payments or get a mortgage deferral from the bank if you can? And over what time frame is reasonable to work out payments, plan for tenants to make up for lost rent?
I can speak to a conversation I had with a couple of different banks and lenders, and that speaks to the deferral programs they have. So in some cases, I haven't heard of all mortgage payments being deferred, and I think that's the way the banks are positioning themselves. I've heard of some banks positioning the program as a principal only payment, so interest is deferred for 6 months. I would say in response to that question, contacting your lender and finding out what your options are is really important. People who are being very above board and proactive, I think are trying to solve problems. And I think taking that into consideration and making promises to each other about repayment plans is quite a reasonable thing to do. And again, you wouldn't have really any other answer to that through the landlord tenant board if you decided to go down that road anyway. So I think taking that compassion is probably a good thing, and keeping accurate accounting of what you're doing and the decisions you're making are really, really important.
And documenting everything, even a phone call of when you called and what time and what date and everything else. Look, we are getting close to an hour right now, and thank you both, because I know even Andrew wasn't able to stay for an hour and he did. So thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Kayla, for your time and your expertise and your love for giving back to these ladies. I wanted to say that above all, yes, there will be not so good tenants, just like there is not so good, landlords. But it's very important in times like this and ongoing, not just only this time, but ongoing, to have a relationship with tenants. And that's what I love also with property managers like you, Andrew, is that you do have you understand the tenants, you understand who they are, what they're going through, and you have that relationship that you can talk to them. Of course, if you have a large or a big building, that's very hard to do, but we are still small investors and we can still do that. So reaching out and being compassionate and being understanding of your tenants hopefully will do you more good than whatever it is that we have to deal with right now. Yeah, any last advice, Andrew and Kayla, to the ladies?
I think my piece, I'll definitely leave the last words to Kayla, but I think I'm seeking comfort from looking to our leadership in government, our leadership in the industry, and knowing full well that I am not the only one going through this. There are people across the country and across the province really struggling to problem solve, and you're not alone. So I think Tahani, the fact that you're providing leadership, speaks volumes, and people really appreciate it. So keep on keeping on, and we'll wish you the best and good luck through all this.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you so much. Kayla?
Politics is so important in the housing industry, and we need to encourage people to get more involved into the politics side of this industry, to pay attention, to learn, and most importantly is to problem solve. These people don't know exactly what we deal with from our day-to-day operations. They don't know what it's like to be in the trenches here. So we really need to kind of pay attention to their moves, come up with the solutions, and know that you need to unite as a strong founded organization, industry of investors, housing providers, and be able to give the expert advice to our elected officials so we can help them do what's best for all people involved.
Thank you both so much. And until next time, I don't know when, it can be next week, it can be the week after, but thank you both. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tahani.
Thank you. So ladies, I just wanted to stay on for an extra minute here to say that, remember, tomorrow we have a lawyer that is all things real estate, and he's very knowledgeable when it comes to landlord and tenant laws and regulations. Any questions that you have, put them down, and let's ask him tomorrow when at noon again, same time, same place at noon. And thank you again. There's so much to say to you. There's so much that I wanted to share, but at this time, I think 1 hour is good enough. I'll be back, and let me know if there is anything else that you need support with. I can bring on. I've got a wealth of friends, a wealth of amazing, incredible friends that are experts in any field, in all fields, that if you need anything or help or support with anything, just let me know and I'll bring them on. And until I see you again tomorrow, have a wonderful day.